Guess who's the cutest kitty in the whole world? Yeah, it's right, it's my kitty. Yeah. His little heartbeat is going so fast. Well, I feel loved. So I am in midterm land, so that's fun. I had a JS test today, and that was difficult. We were doing a lot of like raster analysis, which so I don't know how familiar everyone is with JS, so it might not make any sense no matter what I say. But essentially, there are like points you can have in mapping systems. You can have lines in mapping systems. And those are called vector data, and they're like constrained points. But then raster is sort of like, how would you map something like elevation, or how would you map something like land use over an area? Like that's not like a defined line. There's going to be kind of some like wiggly stuff going on, like a gradient. And so the test was kind of based on like combining that like vector data and raster data, putting them together to make maps. It wasn't terrible. It was just like a lot of the things that they had to do was like really time consuming, and it's really stressful when you have a 2-hour test. But luckily he gave us extra time, which I needed desperately. He was a little bit mean in some of the areas. Like he gave us data files, and then he like purposely put them in the wrong coordinate system, so that like if you try and use them just straight up, you're gonna get the wrong answer. So you have to like make sure you like look at the metadata and be like, what's this? And like still it was. And then tomorrow I have an ecology test, which I'm less concerned about because it is an undergraduate class. So this past weekend, Emily and I went to Jekyll Island, which is super fun. And we actually stayed in an Airbnb on St. Simon's Island, which is more fun. So I was sitting in lab, and this guy came in, Nate Niblick, who's a cool professor, and he was trying to convince some other people to come help him build deer exclosures on Jekyll Island over the weekend. And I overheard this, and I was like, I want to go to Jekyll Island. Like, that's cool. I want to know what's there. So I sort of like creepily emailed him afterward, and I was like, hi, I was just randomly sitting in your lab, but I would like to volunteer myself and Emily to come build deer exclosure with you. And he was like, great. So he sent this email to Lizzie King, who's a different professor, and he was like, yo, you got some volunteers. And then it turns out that the project is for this one girl who's actually in my plant bio class, who did really cool stuff in archaeology. She worked on Rising Star Cave, which I mentioned at one point, and she's so cool. And then this other guy, Joseph Hansen, who's a master's student who's in my Fan Rating 200 class. So it was actually great. It was like a great opportunity to like meet with people I've already met, but like kind of get to know them better. We drove down to St. Simon's Island, where we stayed in an Airbnb, which was awesome. And then we worked on Jekyll, and we were building these deer exclosures, and they were, just these long, tall poles. And you start by, you put sleeves in the ground, and then you put the pole in the sleeve, you tighten it in, then you put netting all around it, secure it with zip ties and make sure it's all taut, and then you kind of build like a gate. And the idea is that it's supposed to see like what happens when you exclude deer from these areas. And the reason that they want to do this is that there are these large oak trees out there, and for some reason there's a lot of the adult ones, but they like aren't really finding any of the juvenile like seedling ones. And they're like, whoa, what's causing this age gap? Like, that's probably bad for the ecosystem. And they think that maybe it's deer. And it's funny because on Jekyll Island, people are like, the deer are so cute, you can't kill them, which is like opposite of anything anywhere else in the South probably, where they're like, let's shoot everything. And so there are just so many deer everywhere, and that's a problem because deer like to munch things. And if you've ever heard of trophic cascades, which I'm learning about in ecology actually right now, but if you don't know what they are, you should look them up. Trophic cascades are what cause, when you get rid of your top predator, or when you add too many herbivores, you end up with sort of this like gross base primary production layer, and you're like, everything is gross. That was really fun. The downside is that I got a bunch of chiggers. The upside is that I got to do a bunch of field work with Emily and some of the coolest professors on campus and some of the coolest people on campus. So it was so great. We also got to walk around on the beach. So it was fun. And I'm planning for spring break. Emily and I are going to do some stuff, and part of that stuff is the second half of the week. We are going to look for tortoise burrows, and I kind of need to figure out what stuff I'm going to bring in my protocol, but we'll hopefully be actually gathering data for my thesis, which is so cool. So for my thesis, I've been kind of thinking about stuff like, how can I classify clustering, and how can I use the clustering that I find, like what spatial scale I find it at, how can I use that to find more juveniles than we're currently finding on the landscape. And that means I make a lot of boring graphs, but essentially it's just how many things are near me and what's the significant level of clumping, and then taking those clumps. And then because maybe I'm an overachiever, maybe I just like wanted to get some, like, find some real data, I I actually did this for every single LTDS study that the DNR has done in Georgia in the past 5 years, and so it's a lot of sites to go through. But in summary, things tend to clump. Juveniles tend to clump somewhere between 10 and 20 meters, and it's very exciting. I think my cat wants to get out. Kitty. Wow. Cat butt. Yeah, so not a whole lot to say that's going on, but it's been good. I think I'm kind of chugging away. Grad school, I can't believe it's already spring break, and then after that, I only have until like the end of April, and then it's time for summer, and I have to start researching. Ah! My cat is crawling on the shelves, and he's just kind of being a weirdo. Kitty, kitty, kitty. Kitty, kitty, kitty. I'm also working on playing the guitar, which is going exceptionally poorly because I don't know how to play. But, you know, that's always fun. I really like having my ego kicked, you know, as a fun hobby in my spare time when I'm not getting my ego kicked at college. So that's good. It's really F. F is the problem here. I can't stand by. I'm not that naive. I'm just out to find the better part of me. I'm more than a bird, I'm more than a plane, I'm more than some pretty face beside a train. And it's not easy to be me. Wish that I could cry, fall upon my knees, find a way to lie, without a home I'll never see. It may sound absurd, but don't be naive. Even heroes have the right to bleed. Maybe disturbed, but won't you concede? Even heroes have the right to dream, and it's not not easy to be me. Up ahead, away from me. It's alright. I don't actually know how to play D, so we're gonna take a pause. Up, head away from me. It's alright. You can all sleep sound tonight. I'm not crazy or anything. I can't stand by. I'm not that naive. Men weren't meant to ride. Clouds between their knees. I'm only a man. I'm only a man in a little red sheet, digging for kryptonite in this one-way street. I'm only a man in a funny red sheet, looking for special things inside of me, and it's not easy to be me. No. me. So yeah, that needs some work.